The widower bought an old house at auction, but the sound of a drum in the basement made him freeze. Howard Thompson was 72 years old and carried on his shoulders the weight of a loneliness that hurt more than any physical pain. It had been 3 years since Margaret had passed away, taking with her all the light that brightened his days, and since then he had lived in a small rented apartment in downtown Springfield, surrounded only by memories and the deafening silence of someone who no longer had anyone to talk to. When he saw the auction announcement for that old house on the outskirts of town, something inside him stirred for the first time in years. The real estate agent, a rushed young man who barely looked people in the eye, assured him that the property had been vacant for over 20 years and that the price was a real steal because of its poor condition. Howard didn't think twice. He used the savings he had kept with no particular purpose and won the property for a price that made the other interested parties laugh, thinking he was crazy. Maybe he was. But for the first time since Margaret was gone, he felt he had a reason to wake up in the morning. The house was on a dirt road, set back from the nearest neighbors by about 200 meters on each side. It was an old building, with exposed bricks in some parts where the plaster had fallen off, with red clay roof tiles and a wooden porch that creaked with every step. The garden, if you could even call it that, was a tangle of tall weeds and shrubs that had grown out of control. Howard parked his old pickup truck in front of the rusty gate, holding tightly to the key the agent had given him. His fingers trembled. He didn't know if from anxiety or fear. It took 3 strong pushes for the front door to give way. The smell of mold and old wood immediately filled his nostrils. The main room was spacious, with a high ceiling that made the space seem even emptier. There was some furniture covered in dusty sheets, a fallen bookcase in the corner, and marks on the walls where pictures must have hung for decades. Howard walked slowly, his footsteps echoing on the old plank floor. Every sound seemed amplified in that heavy silence. That's when he heard it. A rhythmic, muffled sound coming from somewhere deeper in the house. Thump, thump, thump. Thump, thump, thump. As if someone was beating a drum, keeping a steady, almost hypnotic rhythm. Howard froze in the middle of the room, his heart racing inside his chest. The agent had sworn the house was empty, completely empty. Thump, 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 thump. The sound continued, persistent, coming from somewhere in the back. Howard felt his legs grow heavy, as if the floor had turned to quicksand. He thought about running out, going back to the pickup truck and leaving, never to return. But something stronger than fear held him there. Maybe it was the stubbornness of someone who had already lost so much that nothing else seemed truly frightening. Or maybe it was just the curiosity of a man who had nothing left to lose. He followed the sound, crossing a narrow hallway where the wallpaper was peeling in long strips. He passed through the abandoned kitchen, with an old rusty stove and a cracked sink. The sound grew louder with each step. Thump, thump, thump. Thump, thump, thump. It was coming from a door at the end of the hallway, a dark wooden door with its paint all peeled off, and a heavy latch hanging open. Howard placed his hand on the cold latch. He took a deep breath. He pushed the door slowly, and it opened with a sharp creak that cut through the air. On the other side was a wooden staircase descending into darkness, a basement. Or was it a back room built half a level below? Daylight didn't reach down there, only the dense darkness and that insistent sound. Thump, 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 thump. He carefully descended the steps, holding firmly onto the wobbly handrail. The wood creaked under his feet, threatening to give way at any moment. When he reached the top step, his eyes began adjusting to the dim light. There was a small dirty window on the back wall, letting in only a thin sliver of faint light. And there, in the corner of the small, stuffy room, stood an old metal drum. The sound had stopped. Howard stood there, staring at the drum. It was simple, made from a repurposed large paint can, with a stretched leather top held by worn ropes. Beside it lay 2 wooden drumsticks on the uneven concrete floor. There was no one else there. No sign that anyone had been in that place recently. Just dust, cobwebs in the corners, and that smell of a long, closed space. He took a few steps toward the drum, his eyes scanning every inch of the room. There was no door other than the one he had used to enter. The window was sealed with boards nailed from the outside. How could someone have gotten in? How could someone have played that drum moments ago and then vanished? Howard picked up one of the drumsticks from the floor. The wood felt cold and damp to the touch. He looked at the drum, at the surface of the stretched leather that seemed old and dried out. Without thinking much, he struck it once. The sound echoed in the small space, surprisingly clean and strong for such an old, battered instrument. Thump. He waited. Nothing. Just the echo slowly fading away. He struck it again, 2 times in a row. Thump, thump. The silence that followed was deafening. Howard dropped the drumstick back on the floor and started climbing the stairs, feeling foolish. He was getting old and starting to hear things. It was probably the wind hitting a loose part of the house, or animals on the roof. It had to be that. But when he was halfway up the stairs, he heard it again. Thump, 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 thump. Howard turned so fast he almost lost his balance. He went down the steps 2 at a time, returning to the basement. The drum was exactly as he had left it. The drumsticks on the floor. No one there, nothing moving. His heart was pounding so hard it hurt. He went back up, this time not stopping until he reached the main room. He needed fresh air. He needed to think clearly. He went out onto the porch, taking deep breaths of the late afternoon air. The sun was beginning to set, tinting the sky orange and pink. It was beautiful, peaceful, completely normal. Howard sat on a porch step, taking off the leather hat he wore to protect himself from the sun. He ran his hand through his long white beard, a habit he had when he was nervous. There had to be a logical explanation. There always was. He was a practical man who had worked with his hands his whole life, building and fixing things. He didn't believe in ghosts or lost souls. It had to be something else. He decided that the next day he would return with tools and start exploring the house properly. He would check every loose board, every hole in the wall, every possible hidden entrance. He was going to find out what was causing that sound. He had to find out. Because if he couldn't, if it remained an unexplained mystery, maybe he couldn't stand living there. And Howard needed that house. He needed a purpose. He needed something to make him get out of bed every day. As he drove back to the apartment, now almost dark, he couldn't get the rhythm of that drum out of his head. Thump, 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 thump. It was a strange rhythm, not completely regular, as if whoever was playing it was hesitating between beats, or as if they were trying to communicate something. That night Howard could barely sleep. He lay staring at the ceiling of the small bedroom, mentally replaying everything he had seen in the house. He thought of Margaret, how she would have reacted to that situation. She probably would have laughed at him, called him a coward, and then gone down to the basement without hesitation to investigate. She had always been the brave one of the two, the adventurer, the one who wasn't afraid of anything. Howard felt his eyes burn. 3 years, 3 long years, and it still hurt as if it had been yesterday. The doctors said she didn't suffer, that it was quick, a heart problem nobody knew she had. She was there, cooking Sunday lunch, and suddenly just collapsed. When he got back from the market, it was already too late. He didn't even get a chance to say goodbye, to tell her one more time that he loved her, to thank her for the 47 years they had spent together. The apartment he rented afterward was practical, clean, functional, but it wasn't a home. It was just a place where he slept and ate, avoiding being there as much as possible because every moment alone was a reminder of everything he had lost. The old house he bought, as strange as it was, represented a possibility, the chance to create something new, to have a project, to have a reason to get up. The next morning, Howard filled his pickup truck with tools, powerful flashlights, a box of gloves, and even an old camera he used to take pictures of the construction work he did. If he was going to investigate this, he would do it right. He would document everything. He would stop in town on the way and buy a notebook to jot down his findings. He was going to treat it like a project, methodical and organized. The sun was already high when he reached the house. In the daytime, with clear light, the place seemed less scary and more just old and neglected. Howard started with the top part, checking the roof from the outside with a ladder he found tossed in the backyard. Several tiles were broken or missing. He would need to redo a good part of the roof before the rainy season started. but he didn't see anything that could explain strange sounds. He went back into the house, this time with the powerful flashlight lighting up every corner. He checked the walls, tapping lightly to look for hollow spaces. He opened the old kitchen cabinets, all empty except for a few crooked shelves. He went to the main bedroom where there was a rusty bed without a mattress and an old wardrobe with the door fallen off. Nothing unusual. He returned to the hallway leading to the basement. The door was open exactly as he had left it the day before. He went down the stairs slowly, lighting each step well. The wood was rotten in some spots. He would need to replace it before someone got hurt. Before he himself got hurt. He reached the small room in the basement. The drum was still there in the same place, the drumsticks beside it. Howard walked around it, examining every detail. The leather was indeed old, with some cracks on the edges. The ropes holding it to the metal container were worn but still firm. He bent down and looked underneath. Nothing but dust and some dried-up cockroaches. He turned his attention to the walls. They were exposed brick, with some parts covered by a rough plaster that had peeled off in several spots. He lit up every inch, looking for openings, cracks, anything that could indicate a hidden access. Nothing. The walls were solid. The small window on the back wall was indeed nailed shut from the outside. He could see the rusty nails going through the planks. No one could enter or leave through there without making a lot of noise and leaving obvious marks. And there were no marks. Nothing had been moved there in a very, very long time. Howard sat on the bottom step of the stairs, confused. What had he heard the day before? He was absolutely sure he had heard it. It wasn't his imagination. It was real, clear, unmistakable. So what had caused it? He sat there in silence, just watching the drum under the flashlight's beam. The minutes passed slowly. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Nothing happened. Just the heavy silence and the smell of mold. He was about to give up and go back upstairs when he heard a different noise. It wasn't the drum, it was more like a dragging sound coming from above, from somewhere in the house. Howard climbed the stairs quickly, his heart racing again. He followed the sound to the kitchen. It seemed to come from behind the old pantry. He approached slowly, shining his flashlight. Nothing. The sound had stopped, but when he opened the pantry door, something fell from above with a loud crash. Howard jumped back, startled. When the dust settled, he saw it was just a pile of old boards that had been leaning precariously against the wall and must have lost their balance when he opened the door. He took a deep breath, feeling foolish. He was getting scared of everything. He needed to calm down. This was just an old house with normal noises from an old structure. Nothing more. He spent the rest of the morning making a mental list of everything he would need to fix. It was a lot, months of work, maybe more than a year if he did it all alone. But he had time, and he needed the work to keep his mind busy. So he wouldn't think about Margaret all the time, so he wouldn't sink back into that sadness that had almost consumed him in the first months after her departure. When he was already getting tired and thinking about leaving, he decided to take one last look at the basement before going out. He went down again, this time without the flashlight, because he had left the door open and a little natural light came in from the hallway upstairs. The drum was exactly where it had always been. Howard watched it for a long moment. Then, moved by an impulse he couldn't explain, he picked up the 2 drumsticks from the floor. He sat on the lowest step of the stairs, positioned the drum between his legs and began to play. He didn't know how to play the drum. He had never tried before. But his hands seemed to move on their own, creating a simple and repetitive rhythm. Thump, 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 thump. The same rhythm he had heard the day before. His fingers followed the pattern almost instinctively, as if the rhythm was already inside him, just waiting to come out. He played for a few minutes, lost in that repetitive movement that had something almost meditative about it. Then he stopped, dropping the drumsticks on the floor again. The silence that followed seemed different somehow, lighter, less oppressive. Howard climbed the stairs, locked the house door and left, feeling strangely at peace. In the following days, he established a routine. He woke up early, had a simple coffee, and drove to the house. He spent the whole day there, working on small repairs, cleaning, organizing. He always avoided the basement during the day, telling himself he needed to focus on the main areas first. But every afternoon, before leaving, he went down the stairs and played the drum for a few minutes. He never heard the sound coming from the instrument when he wasn't playing it. He began to convince himself that he had imagined everything on the first day. Stress, tiredness, loneliness, all of it together creating auditory hallucinations. It made sense. It was the most logical explanation. It was on the fourth afternoon when he was playing the drum as usual that it happened. He stopped playing and sat there on the step, just resting and enjoying the silence. That's when he heard footsteps upstairs. Clear, distinct footsteps of someone walking across the living room floor. Howard froze, the drumstick still in his hands. His first thought was that it could be a thief. But what would a thief steal from an old empty house? There was nothing of value there except himself. An old man alone in an isolated place. He would be an easy target for anyone who wanted to do harm. Fear ran up his spine like an icy wave. He didn't have a cell phone. He was completely alone. The nearest house was 200 meters away. The footsteps continued, now approaching the hallway that led to the basement. Howard looked around frantically, searching for something he could use as a weapon. There was only the drum and the drumsticks. Nothing useful. He stood up slowly, climbing the first steps silently. The door at the top of the stairs was slightly ajar. He was sure he had left it like that. Through the crack, he could see a shadow moving in the hallway. Whoever it was stood right there on the other side. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to hit the like button and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out as we're just getting started. Now, back to the story. Howard took a deep breath, gathering all the courage he had. He wasn't young anymore, but he was still strong. Decades of hard work had kept his muscles firm. If he needed to defend himself, he would. He climbed the rest of the stairs in one go and pushed the door open forcefully. On the other side stood a woman. She screamed, startled, jumping back and nearly falling. She was older, probably in her early 60s, thin, with graying hair tied in a loose bun. She wore a simple printed cotton dress and worn-out slippers. In her arms she carried a basket with some fruit. For a long moment they just stood there, looking at each other, breathing heavily. Then she spoke in a trembling voice. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. I thought no one was here. I saw the pickup truck but assumed you had gone for a walk." Howard's heart was still racing, but he began to calm down as he realized she seemed more frightened than he was. "Who are you?" he asked, trying to sound firm but not threatening. "My name is Barbara. I live just down the road." She gestured vaguely toward the street. "I'm your neighbor. Well, the closest neighbor at least. I came to bring some welcome fruit. The door was open, so I came in, but that was wrong, I know. I'm sorry." Howard relaxed a little. A neighbor. Just a neighbor being polite. He took a deep breath, feeling the fear give way to embarrassment. "No, I'm sorry too. I got scared as well. I wasn't expecting visitors." Barbara took a few steps back, placing the basket on an old table in the hallway. "I heard from the realtor that someone had bought the house. I was glad. It's not good to have abandoned houses in the neighborhood. They attract all sorts of trouble. So you're the new owner?" "Yes, I am. Howard Thompson." He extended his hand, which was sweaty and trembling. She shook his hand with surprising strength for someone of her stature. "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Howard. I brought some bananas and oranges from my tree. They're organic, I don't use pesticides, and there are some breads I baked this morning too, wrapped in the cloth." "Thank you very much. You didn't have to go to the trouble." "It's no trouble. It's what neighbors do, or at least it used to be back in the old days." She smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. There was a sadness there, something familiar to Howard, the sadness of someone who was also too alone. They stood there for a moment, an awkward silence settling between them. Then Barbara broke the silence. "The house is beautiful. Or it was. It needs a lot of work, but it has good bones. It's solid. They don't make houses like this anymore." "That's true, it'll be a lot of work, but I've got time." Howard looked around, seeing the house through her eyes. "Did you know the previous owners?" Her expression changed subtly. Something flashed across her face, too quickly for him to identify properly. Fear, sadness, discomfort. "Yes, I did. A long time ago. But it's been over 20 years since the house was empty. After the last residents left, no one ever wanted to live here again. Why? Howard asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Barbara averted her gaze, her hands nervously playing with the hem of her dress. Oh, you know how it is. Old abandoned houses always come with stories. People say there are ghosts, strange noises, that kind of nonsense folks make up. But it's just superstition. I don't believe in those things. The way she said it, too quickly, looking everywhere but at him, made Howard suspect she wasn't being completely honest, but he decided not to press further. They had just met. He had no right to demand confessions. I don't believe it either, he said, though the memory of the drum sound echoed in his mind. It's just an old house needing care. Barbara nodded, seeming relieved by his answer. She took a few steps toward the main door. Well, I won't take any more of your time. If you need anything, my house is the third one down the road, the one with the mango trees in front and a blue fence. The gate is always open during the day. Thank you, Mrs. Barbara, and thank you for the fruits. She waved and left, her light footsteps on the creaky floor. Howard watched as she walked along the dirt path, her small, stooped figure slowly moving away. There was something about her that moved him, a kind of loneliness he recognized well because it was the same one he carried. He picked up the basket she had left and took it to the kitchen. The bananas were perfectly ripe, the oranges firm and fragrant. The breads, still warm inside the dish towel, had a homemade smell that made his stomach growl. He couldn't remember the last time he had eaten something truly homemade, made with care. Since Margaret had passed, his meals had been limited to practical, quick, tasteless things. He ate one of the breads right there, standing in the old kitchen, and it was surprisingly good. It tasted like childhood, like Sundays at his grandmother's house, like simpler times. Without thinking much, he stored the rest in the basket and decided he would return early the next day to properly thank her, and perhaps discover more about the house's history. But that night, lying in the apartment bed, he couldn't stop thinking about two things. First, the drum sound he had heard on the first day, and that had never repeated. Second, the expression on Barbara's face when he asked about the former residents. She knew something that bothered her to talk about. Howard was a patient man. He had learned over the years that the truth always came out sooner or later. He just needed to have patience and pay attention. And now, for the first time in 3 years, he had something to focus his attention on besides the pain of loss. He had a mystery to solve. He had a house to rebuild. He had a purpose. The next day he woke up with the strange feeling of having dreamed about the drum. He couldn't remember the dream's details, just the feeling that someone was trying to tell him something through that rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. Thump, thump, thump. The sound echoed in his mind even while awake. He arrived at the house earlier than usual, and before starting any work, decided to investigate the basement more thoroughly. He went down with his powerful flashlight and a tape measure, determined to measure every inch of that space. If there was any hiding place or secret passage, he would find it. He started with the walls, measuring the thickness, tapping different points to hear if there were empty spaces. Nothing. All solid. He measured the room's size from the inside and then tried to estimate the size from the outside, using the house's external walls as a reference. The numbers matched. There was no unaccounted space. The basement ceiling was low, but there were no trapdoors or openings. The floor was cement, cracked in several spots but visibly solid. He stomped his foot in different places, listening to the sound. All the same. Nothing hollow. He was about to give up when he noticed something he hadn't seen before. In the darkest corner of the room, hidden behind some old stacked boards, there was something marked on the wall. He moved the boards aside, raising a cloud of dust that made him cough. When the air cleared, he illuminated the wall and saw. They were drawings, scribbled in charcoal directly on the plaster. Childish drawings, simple but clearly made with care. There was a house with a smiling sun above it, a large tree, and several figures of people holding hands. 2 large, 1 medium, and 1 small. A family. Beneath the drawings, in a child's shaky letters, it read, Tyler, 6 years. Howard touched the letters with his fingers, feeling the uneven texture of the charcoal on the plaster. Tyler, 6 years old. A child had been there, had lived there, or at least spent enough time in that basement to draw on the walls. But why? Why would a child be in a dark, damp basement when there was a whole house upstairs? He took the old camera from his backpack and photographed the drawings. He needed to show this to someone. He needed answers. And there was only one person who might have them: Barbara. He quickly went upstairs, locked the house, and walked down the dirt road to the third house, the one she had described. It was small and simple, but well kept. The blue fence was faded but intact, the mango trees heavy with green fruit. The gate was open, as she had said. Howard entered slowly, calling out, "Mrs. Barbara, is anyone home?" It took a moment, but then she appeared in the doorway, drying her hands on a cloth. "Mr. Howard, what a surprise! Has something happened?" "No, nothing bad, but I need to talk to you. I found something in the house, something I think you need to see." Her expression changed immediately. The smile vanished, replaced by something between fear and resignation. "Come in," she said, her voice lower. I suppose it was about time for this conversation anyway. Barbara's house inside was cozy, full of small objects and photographs on the walls. It smelled of fresh coffee and bread. She led him to a small table in the simple kitchen and poured coffee without asking if he wanted any. Howard accepted the cup, waiting for her to sit down. "So," she began, not looking at him, "what did you find?" "Drawings, in the basement, made by a child named Tyler." Barbara closed her eyes. Her hands trembled slightly as she held her own coffee cup. She stayed like that for a long moment, and Howard thought she might cry. But when she opened her eyes again, they were dry, just tired. "Tyler," she repeated the name like a prayer. "It's been so long since I've heard that name spoken aloud." "Who was he?" "My grandson." Her voice came out choked. "My only grandson. My daughter Claire's son." "What happened to him?" Barbara took a sip of coffee, buying time. When she spoke, her voice was firmer, as if telling a story she had rehearsed 1,000 times in her head, but never said out loud. "Tyler lived in that house with his parents. My daughter Claire had married a local boy, Andrew. A good boy, hard-working, but a bit reserved. They lived in the house, which at the time belonged to Andrew's parents. I lived here, close by, visited often, watched my grandson grow up." She stopped, took a deep breath. The boy was special, different. He didn't speak like other children, had trouble expressing himself, got nervous with loud noises, unexpected sounds. Nowadays there's a name for it. They call it autism. But back then, we didn't know. We just knew he was his own way, and we loved him anyway. "And the drum?" Howard asked softly. Barbara smiled for the first time since she started telling the story. "The drum was his favorite thing. His grandfather, Andrew's father, had been a musician when he was younger. Played at parties, foro, things like that. He had that old drum he had made with his own hands. One day, he gave it to Tyler, teaching him a simple rhythm. The boy fell in love with it. He spent hours playing, always the same rhythm without stopping. It was the only thing that calmed him down when he got nervous." "Thump, thump, thump," Howard murmured, recognizing the pattern. "That's right, always that rhythm. His grandfather said it was a calling rhythm, something he had learned he didn't know where. He said it was for calling the people we love when they are far away." "And the drawings in the basement?" Barbara's expression darkened. Sometimes when he got too worked up, when the outside world became too much for him, Tyler would go down to the basement. It was quieter there, darker, with fewer distractions. His parents allowed it. They knew he'd come back when he felt better. That's where he made the drawings, his family, the place he loved. "You said used to live, and he's not there anymore. What happened?" Barbara looked out the kitchen window to a distant place in time. There was a fire, not a big one. It started in the kitchen, something with the old stove. Everyone got out quickly. No one was hurt, but the house had a lot of smoke damage, needed repairs. The family left temporarily, was going to stay for a few months at a relative's house in another town while everything was fixed. She paused, and Howard saw her hands trembling again. But they never came back. After a few months in the other town, Andrew got a good job there. They decided to start over, make a new life for themselves. Claire called me, said it was for the best. A fresh start for Tyler, new surroundings. She invited me to come along, but I didn't want to. This land is my life. I was born and raised here. I can't imagine living anywhere else. And the house was left abandoned. Yes, Andrew's parents had already passed away. There was no one else to take care of it. And I tried to buy it, tried at least to maintain it. But I didn't have the money. Time went on, until it became the ruins you bought. Howard fell silent, processing it all. A sad story, but not an uncommon one. Families drift apart, houses are abandoned, life goes on. But there was still something that didn't make sense. Mrs. Barbara, when I first came here, I heard the drum being played in the basement with the same rhythm you described, but there was no one there. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't decipher. I know, she said simply. What do you mean, you know? I've heard it too, many times over the years. Always the same rhythm, the rhythm Tyler used to play. That's why the house got a reputation for being haunted. That's why no one wanted to buy it before you. Howard felt a chill run down his spine. But you said you don't believe in those things. And I don't, she replied firmly. I don't believe in ghosts or lost souls. But I believe that house has memory. That places hold echoes of what happened in them. That a child's love for their home can leave marks that don't disappear just because time has passed. That doesn't make logical sense. A lot in this life doesn't make logical sense, Mr. Howard. But it happens anyway. They fell silent, drinking the coffee that had gone cold. Howard didn't know what to think. Part of him wanted to dismiss it all as silly superstition. But another part, the part that had felt the drumbeat in his bones, that had seen the child's drawings on the basement walls, that understood the loneliness of abandoned places, knew there was something more there. Are you in touch with your daughter? With Tyler? He finally asked. The pain that crossed Barbara's face was sharp and deep. I was. But things cooled off over time. I couldn't fully accept their decision to stay so far away. I said harsh things when I shouldn't have. Pride, you know. It's a terrible thing, makes you lose the ones you love. Nowadays, we barely exchange messages on birthdays. I don't even know how my grandson is doing, if he still likes to play the drum, if he still draws, if he still remembers this house, this place. Her voice broke at the end, and a single tear traced a path down her wrinkled face. Howard felt something tighten in his chest. He knew that pain well. The pain of regret, of lost time, of words left unspoken. He had 47 years with Margaret and still felt it wasn't enough. Barbara had a living grandson somewhere and didn't speak to him out of pride and hurt. It's never too late to make things right, he said softly. Believe me. I would give anything to have one more day with my wife, to say the things I put off for later. You still have that chance. Barbara wiped her tears with the back of her hand. Maybe you're right, but I'm afraid. Afraid that they don't want me in their lives anymore. Afraid I've lost my grandson forever because of my tough ways. Or maybe they're afraid too. Afraid that you won't forgive them. Someone has to take the first step. She nodded slowly, but Howard could see the words hadn't truly sunk in. Not yet. Sometimes it takes time for the truth to find a home in the heart. He knew that well. He thanked her for the coffee and returned to his house. He spent the rest of the day working, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought about the boy Tyler, about how frightening it must have been for him to flee from a fire. He thought about Barbara, living alone so close to the house that held so many memories of happy times. He thought about Margaret and all the little things he took for granted when she was alive. When the afternoon began to fade, he went down to the basement as had become his habit. He sat on the step, picked up the drumsticks, and played. The simple, repetitive rhythm that he now knew had been taught by a grandfather to his special grandson. A calling rhythm, Barbara had said, to call the people we love when they're far away. Howard played until his arms ached. He played thinking of Margaret, of Tyler, of Barbara, of all the lonely people in the world who carry pieces of themselves in empty places. When he stopped, the silence was deep and complete. But then, in the silence, he heard it. Faint, almost imperceptible, like an echo coming from very far away. Thump, thump, thump. His heart leaped. He stood absolutely still, barely daring to breathe. He waited. The sound didn't come again. Had he imagined it? Was he truly going crazy? He climbed the stairs slowly, locked up the house, and left. But the doubt stayed with him the whole way back. And that night, for the first time in a long while, he had a dream that wasn't a nightmare of loss. He dreamed of a boy playing a drum, his face focused and happy, lost in his own world of rhythms and sounds. The following week passed in a strange pattern. Howard worked on the house during the day, doing small repairs, cleaning, organizing. He visited Barbara some afternoons, drinking coffee and hearing more stories about Tyler, about the family, about the old days, and every afternoon before leaving, he went down to the basement and played the drum. Sometimes he heard the answering echo, sometimes he didn't. He began to suspect he only heard it when he was truly focused, when his mind was quiet and open. On days when he was worried about bills or too tired, he heard nothing. But on days when he played with his heart, with intention, the echo always came. He stopped trying to explain it logically. Barbara was right. Some things just happen, whether they make sense or not. The house had memory, and for some reason he didn't fully understand. That memory was responding to him. A month had passed since he bought the house. The place was starting to become livable. Howard had fixed the most urgent leaks, replaced the rotten floorboards, cleaned away years of grime. There was still much to do, but it no longer looked like a ruin. It looked like a house someone was caring for, a house that was becoming a home again. It was on a Thursday afternoon that Barbara showed up at his door unannounced. Howard was in the kitchen, trying to fix the sink faucet, when he heard the knock. She was on the porch, holding a bowl covered with a cloth. "I made soup," she said without preamble. "Without vegetable soup, my mother's recipe. I thought you might like it." "Mrs. Barbara, you didn't have to trouble yourself." "It's no trouble." She repeated the same words from when they first met. "It's what neighbors do." But this time the smile reached her eyes. And Howard understood that it was more than just soup. It was an offer of friendship, of companionship, of not being alone. And he realized he needed it as much as she did. "Please, come in. I can make coffee." They ate the soup together in the kitchen of the house, using disposable bowls Howard had bought to use during the renovations. The soup was delicious, full of flavor and care. They talked about trivial things, about the weather, about the renovations, about the small-town gossip. It felt good. It felt normal. It was the first shared meal Howard had since Margaret left. When they finished, Barbara looked around the kitchen. "It's looking nice. The house. You can tell it's being loved again." "Thank you. There's still a lot to do, but I'm getting there. Claire would be happy to know someone's taking care of the place. She loved this house. We all did." Howard hesitated, but then decided to take a chance. "Why don't you call her? Why not tell her the house is being renovated? It could be a way to start talking again." Barbara looked at her hands, at the prominent veins and skin marked by age. "I'm scared," she admitted softly. "Scared that it might be too late." "It's never too late as long as everyone is still here." She didn't answer, just nodded vaguely. But Howard saw something change in her eyes, a budding determination, or maybe just the smallest spark of hope. When she left, Howard went down to the basement, not to play the drum, but just to look at the drawings on the wall, the family holding hands, the house with the smiling sun, the big tree, everything so simple, so pure. The worldview of a 6-year-old who didn't yet know that families break apart, that houses get abandoned, that people end up alone. He gently touched the letters of the name, Tyler. Wherever he was now, he'd be a teenager, 15 or 16 years old. Did he still remember this house, these drawings, the rhythm his grandfather had taught him? Howard played the drum that night. He played with more feeling than ever before, and the echo that came back was stronger, clearer. as if something or someone was responding more forcefully, more urgently. Thump, thump, thump. Thump, thump, thump. A call, a request, a bridge between the past and the present. That night, lying in the bed of the apartment he would soon leave to move permanently into the house, Howard had an idea. It was crazy, probably pointless, but he couldn't get it out of his head. The next day, first thing in the morning, he went to an electronics store in town and bought a simple digital recorder. He returned to the house, went down to the basement and set up the recorder. He left it running down there, hidden behind some planks, and went upstairs. He spent the day working normally, trying not to think too much about what he was doing, trying not to feel like he was being ridiculous. When evening came, he went down to check. The recorder had worked perfectly, capturing hours of silence. Howard rewound to the point where he had played the drum the previous afternoon. He heard his own clumsy playing, the irregular beats, the rhythm he was trying to maintain. Then came the silence, and then, faint but unmistakable on the recording, thump, 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 thump. Howard listened 3 times to be sure. It was there, on the recording. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't a hallucination. It was real, or at least real enough for an electronic device to capture. He sat on the step, the recorder in his hands, trying to process what it meant. There was no explanation. It didn't make sense, but it was real. He spent the entire weekend trying to decipher the mystery. He recorded several times, always with the same result. When he played, the echo responded. Sometimes stronger, sometimes weaker, but always there, always the same rhythm. The rhythm a grandfather had taught his special grandson, the calling rhythm. But calling whom, or what? It was the following Monday that Barbara appeared again. This time she wasn't carrying food. She was carrying a cell phone and an expression of extreme nervousness. "I called," she announced as soon as Howard opened the door. "I called Claire. And?" "She didn't answer, but I sent a message. Said I missed her. Said the house was being renovated and it made me think of her, of Tyler. Said I was foolish and proud and just wanted my family back." Her eyes were full of tears, but they were different tears. Not of sadness, but of something like relief, as if a gigantic weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "How you did the right thing," Howard said, making space for her to enter. "What if she doesn't respond? What if it's too late?" "Then at least you tried, but I think she will respond. Mothers and daughters, that bond doesn't break so easily. It may stretch, it may hurt, but it doesn't break." They had coffee together, Barbara checking the phone every few minutes. Howard told her about the recordings, about the drum sound that now had concrete proof it wasn't imagination. She listened attentively, not seeming surprised. "The house is calling," she said simply. "It's calling back what belongs to it." "But Tyler doesn't belong to the house. He belongs to his life, to his family. It's not the boy the house wants, it's his love for it, it's his memory, it's the connection. Places need that to be more than just walls and a roof. They need to be loved, to be homes." Howard thought about that. He thought about Margaret, about how the house they shared for decades became just an empty space after she left. How he couldn't call it home anymore, even with all her things still there. Because home wasn't the place. It was who was in it. It was the love that filled it. It was then that Barbara's phone rang. She almost dropped her cup from the shock. She looked at the screen, her hands shaking so much she could barely hold the device. Howard saw the name. Claire. "Answer it," he encouraged. "Everything will be okay." Barbara took a deep breath and answered. Her voice came out trembling. "Hello? Daughter?" Howard stood up discreetly, giving her privacy, but Barbara held his arm, silently asking him to stay. He stood there, motionless, hearing only one side of the conversation. "Yes, it's me. I know. I'm sorry. Sorry for everything." Tears were flowing freely now. "I know I was difficult. I know I said bad things. But I never stopped loving you and my grandson. I think of him every day, every single day." There was a long pause. Barbara listened, nodding her head, crying, smiling at the same time. Then, "I would love that. I would love to see you. Whenever you want." "The house. Do you remember the house?" It's being renovated. There's a very good man taking care of it. It's becoming beautiful again, like in the old days. A few more minutes of conversation, this time lighter, punctuated by nervous laughter and promises. When she hung up, Barbara was radiant. "They're coming," she said, incredulous. "Next month, during Tyler's school break. They're coming to spend a few days here. See the house, see me. They're coming." Howard felt his own eyes burning. He had helped fix something that seemed lost forever. Not completely, of course. There were still many conversations to be had, many resentments to work through. But it was a start. It was hope. Barbara hugged him, strong and tight, and he returned it. Two lonely old people finding comfort in each other, sharing a joy neither thought they'd feel again. When she left, Howard stood on the house's porch for a long time, just watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. He thought about Margaret, about how happy she would be with what he had done, how she always believed in fixing broken things, in not giving up on people, in giving second chances. "Are you seeing this, Maggie?" He spoke to the air, knowing it was silly but not caring. "I'm doing good things. I'm living again, like you always wanted me to." The wind blew gently, rustling the leaves of nearby trees. Howard chose to believe it was an answer, that somehow, somewhere, Margaret knew and was proud of him. That night he didn't go down to the basement. He didn't play the drum. He just cleaned and organized, preparing the house for visitors. Because Barbara would certainly bring Claire and Tyler to see the place as soon as they arrived. And Howard wanted it to be perfect. He wanted the boy to see that his old home was being loved again. The next month passed in a mix of hard work and anxious anticipation. Howard worked from sunup to sundown, transforming every room in the house. He painted walls, fixed windows, polished the floor until it shone. Barbara came to help sometimes, bringing clean towels, organizing cabinets, adding the little feminine touches the house needed. They became true friends that month. Not just neighbors, but companions, sharing meals, stories, comfortable silences. Howard discovered that Barbara had a sharp sense of humor when she relaxed, that she loved to cook, but never had the motivation to make elaborate meals just for herself. She discovered that Howard was surprisingly cultured, that he read poetry in his spare time, that he had skilled hands but an even softer heart. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. And every night before bed, Howard went down to the basement and played the drum, always receiving the answering echo. Some nights he talked aloud while playing, telling about the progress of the work, about Barbara, about the upcoming visit. He didn't know who he was really talking to. Maybe to the memory of Tyler as a child, maybe to the spirit of the house, maybe to himself. It didn't matter. What mattered was that he no longer felt alone. 1 week before the scheduled visit, Howard had an idea. He gathered all his painting supplies and went down to the basement with ladders, drop cloths, and a sense of purpose. He spent 3 whole days working down there, transforming that dark, oppressive space into something completely different. He painted the walls a soft light blue, installed better lighting, fixed the small window, cleaning the glass until it was transparent and letting natural light in. He built a small shelf on the walls where before there were only bare bricks. And in the center of it all, protected and honored, he left Tyler's drawings visible. He carefully cleaned around them, making sure every charcoal line remained intact. The drum got a special place on a simple pedestal that Howard built with reclaimed wood. It was no longer just a forgotten object in a corner. It was a centerpiece, a work of art, a testament to the love between grandfather and grandson. When Barbara saw what he had done, she cried, not from sadness, but from gratitude. That space, which had been a refuge for a special boy, had been transformed into a loving memorial, a place that honored his memory without being morbid or sad. "He's going to love it," she said, wiping away tears. "My grandson is going to love what you did." "It's for him," Howard replied, "and for the house, and for all of us who need to remember that places matter, that memories matter, that love matters." The day of the arrival dawned sunny and warm. Howard was more nervous than he expected. He put on his best shirt, combed his long white beard, adjusted the leather hat he wore. Barbara showed up early wearing a new floral dress she had bought especially for the occasion. Her eyes shone with emotion and anxiety. What if they don't like it? What if it's changed too much? What if Tyler doesn't remember? She fired off nervous questions. Everything will be fine, Howard reassured her, though he too was swirling with worries. The car arrived just past noon, an ordinary white sedan, kicking up a cloud of dust on the dirt road. It stopped in front of the gate, and for a moment, no one got out. Howard and Barbara waited on the porch, holding hands without realizing it. Then the driver's door opened, and a man in his 40s stepped out. Slim, with hair beginning to grey, a tired but kind face. Andrew, Howard presumed. The passenger door opened, and a woman of the same age emerged, tall, with the same face shape as Barbara, brown hair tied in a ponytail. Claire, without a doubt. Mother and daughter looked at each other over the car roof. The moment stretched, tense and heavy with years of silence and hurt. Then Claire walked around the car and headed toward the porch. Her steps were slow, hesitant. Barbara came down the steps, meeting her halfway. For a second it seemed like they would just stand there looking at each other, but then Claire opened her arms and Barbara collapsed into them, crying openly. The two hugged for long minutes, all the weight of the years dissolving in tears and murmurs of apologies and forgiveness. Andrew stood a little apart, respecting the moment, but smiling. Then he turned to the car's rear door and waved to someone. "Tyler, son, we're here." The rear door opened and a teenager got out. Tall for his 15 years, slim with dark hair falling over watchful eyes. He wore large headphones which he slowly removed. His movements were deliberate, careful, like someone who needed to process every stimulus before reacting. He looked at the house with an expression Howard couldn't decipher. There was recognition there, but also confusion, as if he were seeing something familiar through glass fogged by time. "This is the house?" he asked, his voice deeper than Howard expected. "It's smaller than I remember." "You've grown, my grandson," Barbara said, separating from Claire to look at the boy. "That's why it seems smaller." Tyler didn't immediately approach his grandmother. He stood there, observing everything with a quiet intensity. Then his eyes met Howard's, who was still on the porch. "Who is he?" "This is Mr. Howard," Barbara explained. "He bought the house and is renovating it. He was the one who encouraged me to call you." "And does he know?" "Does he know about—" Tyler didn't finish the sentence, but his eyes drifted to the door leading inside the house. "He knows," Barbara confirmed softly. "And he has something to show you." Howard came down from the porch, walking toward them with slow steps so as not to startle the boy. "Pleasure, Tyler. Your grandmother has spoken a lot about you." The boy studied him for a moment, then extended his hand in a formal gesture. Howard shook it gently. "Is the house very different?" Tyler asked. "In some places, yes, but the important parts are still the same. Want to see?" Tyler nodded slowly. Together the group walked to the house. Claire and Andrew were amazed by the changes. The clean and painted living room, the functional kitchen, the tidy bedrooms. Everything was cared for, loved, alive again. But Tyler just looked around with that quiet expression, as if searching for something specific. Then his eyes found the door at the end of the hallway, the door that led to the basement. "May I?" he asked, not addressing anyone in particular. "You may," Howard replied. "In fact, I did something down there especially for you." Everyone went down together. Howard went first, turning on the lights. When Tyler reached the bottom step and saw the transformed space, he froze. The basement was no longer that dark and oppressive place. It was cozy, lit up, a small sanctuary dedicated to the memories of a boy who had loved that space. And there, on the back wall, his childhood drawings remained untouched, framed by the new paint like little works of art. Tyler walked slowly over to the drawings. He touched the letters of his own name with his fingers, his breath becoming uneven. Then he saw the drum on the pedestal. His hands trembled as he picked it up. He held it carefully, as if holding something precious and fragile. The drumsticks were beside it, and he picked them up too, testing their weight, their texture, Everything so familiar, even after so many years. "It's the same," he murmured. "It's exactly the same." "Your grandfather made it," Barbara said softly, "with his own hands, and he taught you to play." "The calling rhythm," Tyler added. "He said it was to call the people we love when they're far away." Before anyone could respond, Tyler sat on the floor, cross-legged, the drum in his lap, and he began to play. Thump, 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 thump. The rhythm was perfect. It didn't have the hesitation of a beginner or the irregularity of someone who had forgotten over time. It was the rhythm of someone who had played it thousands of times, who had it engraved in his body, in his muscle memory, in his soul. Everyone fell silent, listening. There was something almost sacred in that moment, a teenager reconnecting with a part of himself that he had left behind, a family reconnecting through music, a house regaining its heart. And then something happened that made everyone's hair stand on end. An echo came back. Not from the walls, not from above, but as if it came from within the house itself, from its foundations, from its essence. Faint but unmistakable. Thump, 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 thump. Tyler stopped playing, his eyes wide. He looked around, searching for the source of the sound. Then he started playing again, louder this time. The echo responded, louder too. It was impossible. It was inexplicable, but it was happening right in front of all of them. And Howard saw on each person's face the same mix of astonishment, fear, and something like an understanding beyond words. "The house is answering," Tyler said, amazed. It remembers me." Tears streamed freely down Claire's face. Andrew had his arm around his wife, holding her tight. Barbara held Howard's hand, squeezing it firmly. Tyler kept playing, and the house kept answering. A wordless conversation between a boy and the place that had kept him in its heart all those years. A mutual forgiveness, an acceptance, a recognition that some bonds never truly break. They just wait patiently to be renewed. When he finally stopped, the silence was deep, but not empty. It was the silence of peace, of resolution, of a circle closing. "Thank you," Tyler said, looking at Howard, "for taking care of the house, for taking care of it until I could come back." "No need to thank me," Howard replied, his own voice choked. "It was a privilege." They went up from the basement together and spent the rest of the day in the house, reminiscing, sharing meals, laughing and crying. Andrew revealed that he never really wanted to leave, but at the time it seemed like the only option. Claire admitted that she missed her mother every day, but was afraid to take the first step toward reconciliation. Barbara apologized for being so harsh, for letting pride speak louder than love. And Tyler, for the first time since he arrived, smiled genuinely. He talked about his life, about how he still struggled with the same challenges but had learned to cope better, about how he never forgot the house, the basement, the drum, about how, on the worst days, he would close his eyes and play that rhythm in his mind, and it helped him calm down. "I think Grandpa knew," he said quietly, "when he taught me the rhythm. I think he knew I would need it. That would be my anchor when everything became too much." "Your grandfather was a wise man," Barbara said, "and he loved you very much, just as I love you, just as we all love you." When the sun began to set, Albert said they needed to go. They had booked a room at an inn in the nearby town to spend a few days, but they promised to return the next day and every day after during their stay. Before leaving, Tyler went back to the basement alone. Howard saw him go down, and after a few minutes of hesitation, decided to follow him. He found the boy sitting on the floor, the drum in his lap, just looking at the drawings on the wall. "I was 6, Tyler spoke without turning. "When I made these drawings, it feels like a whole lifetime ago." "In many ways, it is," Howard said, sitting beside him on the cold cement floor. "You were a different person then. But it's still me. That boy still exists inside me somewhere. Scared, confused, trying to make sense of a world that was too big and loud, but also happy. Because I had this house, I had this family, I had this place that was just mine. And you will again. Not in the same way, because nothing ever comes back exactly as it was. But your grandmother is here, the house is here, and you now have a chance to create new memories, even better memories." Tyler finally looked at him. Why did you do this? Why did you care so much about fixing everything? About bringing my family together? Howard thought for a long moment before answering. Because I know what it's like to lose. I know what it's like to be alone. And if I can help someone not lose what they still have, not waste time with the people they love, then it's worth it. All the pain is worth it. Did you lose someone too? My wife. 3 years ago. I'm sorry. Me too. Every day. But I've found that grief doesn't have to be just pain. It can be love too. Love that persists. Love that pushes us to do good things. To help others. To not give up on living even when everything hurts. They fell silent, two humans separated by decades but united by the universal experience of loss, love, and hope. Can I come here whenever I'm visiting? Tyler asked. To the basement? To the drum? Of course, this is your home, Tyler. It always has been. I'm just the temporary guardian until you're ready. Tyler smiled, a small but genuine smile. I think my grandfather sent you. Somehow. To take care of the place, to bring everyone back. Perhaps, Howard agreed, though he wasn't sure if he believed it. Or maybe the house itself called, with its drum, with its memories, with its love. They went up together, and Tyler said goodbye, promising to return early the next day. Howard and Barbara stayed on the porch, waving as the car drove away down the dirt road. Thank you, Barbara said when they were alone again. For everything. For making me call. For renovating the house. For taking care of my grandson's memories. You changed everything. We changed together, Howard corrected. I couldn't have done it alone. I needed you as much as you needed me. She nodded, wiping tears that seemed unwilling to stop flowing. What will you do now, with the house? I'll finish the renovation, and I'll live in it, if you don't mind having a neighbor so close. It would be a pleasure. There's no one I'd rather share this road with. They sat together on the porch steps, watching the sky change color as the sun set. Tomorrow would bring more changes, more emotions, more rebuilding. But now in that moment, there was only peace. The following days were filled with more visits, more stories, more connection. Tyler spent hours in the basement, sometimes playing the drum, sometimes just sitting there absorbing the space. Claire and Barbara began the long process of healing old wounds, talking about resentments and misunderstandings with an honesty that hurts but also heals. Andrew and Howard became unlikely friends, bonded by their love for strong women and a mutual understanding that sometimes a man's role is simply to be present, to support, and not try to fix everything. A week later, as the visit was drawing to a close, Tyler made an unusual request. I want to play for everyone, a proper performance. Can I do it here in the house? Howard and Barbara organized everything. They invited some close neighbors, set up chairs in the large living room, and prepared refreshments. On the appointed day, the house that had stood empty for 20 years was full of life, laughter, and anticipation. When everyone was seated, Tyler went down to the basement alone. A minute later, the sound of the drum began to echo through the house. It wasn't just the calling rhythm his grandfather had taught him. It was a complete, complex composition he had created over the years. It had moments of sadness, of longing, but also of joy, of hope, of new beginnings. And the house responded. Not with a simple echo, but with resonance. The walls vibrated softly with each beat. The floor transmitted the rhythm. The entire house became an instrument, amplifying and responding to Tyler's music. The people listened in reverent silence. Some cried, others smiled. Everyone felt something deep and inexplicable, a connection to the place, to the moment, to the mysterious magic of a house that had patiently waited for the return of its heart. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. When the music ended, the silence that followed was absolute. Then someone began to clap, and soon everyone was on their feet applauding, many with tears in their eyes. Tyler came up from the basement, his face flushed, smiling with a kind of pure happiness, that only comes when we do something we deeply love. It was that night, after everyone had left and only Howard and Barbara were cleaning up, that she shared something important. "Claire and Andrew are thinking," she began hesitantly, "thinking of coming back. Not immediately, but perhaps in a year or two. Tyler is finishing high school. After that, there's nothing really keeping them in the city where they are. And with you here, taking care of the house, making it a home again, they felt it's possible, that they can come home." Howard absorbed the information, a whirlwind of emotions passing through him. Joy for them, happiness for Barbara, but also a pang of uncertainty. He had started to think of the house as his project, his purpose, his fresh start. What would happen if the family returned? As if reading his thoughts, Barbara touched his arm gently. "You will always be a part of this. Always. No matter who lives here, you brought this place back to life. You brought my family back. That debt can never be repaid." "There is no debt," Howard said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "You've given me as much as I've given you. You gave me a purpose, a family, a reason to wake up in the morning with hope instead of just habit." In the following months, things settled into a new normal. Tyler and his parents visited regularly whenever they had holidays or long weekends. The house became a gathering point, a place where the whole family came together, creating new memories on top of the old ones. Howard finished most of the renovations. The house was beautiful, functional, a true home. He moved in permanently, leaving behind the apartment that had never truly been his, and he discovered he no longer felt alone. Even on days when he was physically alone in the house, he felt the presence of everyone who loved that place. He felt Madeline approving of what he had done. He felt the memory of Tyler's grandfather, who had planted the seed of the calling rhythm. He felt the house itself, alive and pulsating around him. The sound of the drum in the basement had become part of the routine. Howard played some nights, keeping up the practice. When Tyler visited, they played together, creating musical dialogues that needed no words, and always, always the house responded. Its constant echo, its approval, its way of saying it was happy, it was complete. It was on one of these late afternoons, almost a year after buying the house, that Howard was sitting on the porch when he saw an unfamiliar pickup truck coming up the road. It stopped in front of the gate, and a young man got out, looking around with an expression of curiosity. "Good afternoon," he called out. "Is this house for sale?" Howard felt something tighten in his chest. For a moment, the possibility of selling, of getting rid of the work, the commitment, the responsibility seemed tempting. But then he looked at the house, at the windows he had fixed, at the walls he had painted, at the garden he had started to plant. He thought of Barbara living 3 houses down, of Tyler and his regular visits, of all the love that place had received and given back. "No," he answered firmly, "it's not for sale. This is my house, my home." The man nodded, shrugged, and drove away. Howard stayed there, feeling the truth of those words resonate within him. It was his home, not because he had bought it at the auction, not because he had renovated it, but because he had put his heart there, because he had found family there, because he had learned to live again there. That night, he went down to the basement and played the drum for a long time. He played for the boy Tyler had been. He played for the grandfather who taught the rhythm. He played for Barbara, and her loneliness turned into connection. He played for Claire and Andrew, and their courage to return. He played for Margaret, who he knew would be proud. And he played for himself, for the 72-year-old man who had found life where he expected to find only an empty house. The echo of the house responded as always, strong and clear. And for the first time, Howard understood completely what it meant. It wasn't a haunting, it wasn't something supernatural. It was simply love. Love echoing through time and space. Love that doesn't die, that doesn't forget, that doesn't give up. Love that waits patiently and answers when called. Thump, 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 the rhythm of calling. Calling those we love, calling ourselves back home, calling the future to build upon the past, calling hope to replace despair, calling life to fill the void. The months continued to pass, bringing changes and growth. Barbara and Howard became inseparable, having dinner together most nights. sharing the small joys and worries of daily life. She taught him to cook dishes he had forgotten since childhood. He fixed things in her house that had been broken for years. Their relationship was pure and simple, not romantic, but deeply loving in the truest sense of the word. They were two souls who found each other when both desperately needed connection and consciously chose each other day after day. Claire's family began spending longer periods at the house, first weeks, then months. Tyler transferred to an online school that gave him more flexibility. Andrew started working remotely. Claire got a job in a nearby town, everything slowly aligning, paving the way for their eventual permanent return. And Howard found he felt no jealousy or threat from this transition. Instead, he felt satisfaction. He saw his role not as the permanent owner, but as a bridge, as the catalyst that had been needed to heal old wounds and allow the family to return to the place that had always been theirs. On a specific day, exactly 1 year and 3 months after buying the house at auction, Howard organized a special lunch. He invited Barbara, Claire, Andrew, and Tyler. He prepared the food carefully, set the table on the porch with a clean tablecloth and flowers from the garden. When everyone was gathered, eating and talking, he asked for their attention. "I have something important to say," he began, feeling all eyes turn to him. "This house has been my salvation. It gave me a purpose when I had none. It gave me family when I was alone. It gave me a reason to live when I was just existing." He paused, taking a deep breath. "But this house isn't really mine. It never was. It's yours. It's Tyler's, who grew up here and left his mark in every corner. It's Claire and Andrew's, who built memories here. It's Barbara's, who watched her grandson play in this garden. I was just the temporary guardian, and I think it's time to pass it on." There was a shocked silence around the table. "Mr. Howard, what are you saying?" Claire asked, worried. "I'm saying I want to transfer the house to Tyler, put it in his name, so that when he turns 18, it will officially be his, as it always should have been." "But where will you live?" Tyler asked, alarmed. Howard smiled. "That's the other part. Barbara and I have talked a lot about this. She has a house that's too big for one person, and I've realized I don't need that much space. I'm moving in with her, to her house. We'll share the space, share the bills, share our lives, like family does." He looked at each of them. "You can come back whenever you want. The house will be here waiting, ready for you, and I'll be 3 houses away, always available if you need help with repairs or just a friend to have coffee with." The tears started immediately. Claire wept openly. Andrew discreetly wiped his eyes. Barbara held Howard's hand on the table, squeezing it tightly, and Tyler, usually so reserved, stood up and hugged Howard tightly. "Why?" he asked, his voice muffled in Howard's shoulder. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because you deserve it. Because this house chose you as much as you chose it. Because love isn't about owning things, it's about making sure they go where they belong." "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything, just promise me you'll take care of the house, that you'll keep the drum in the basement, that you'll play the calling rhythm whenever you need to remember you're not alone." "I promise," Tyler replied without hesitation. "I promise to take care of it like you did." The rest of the lunch was a mix of tears and laughter, of planning and reminiscing. They decided the transition would be gradual. Howard would start moving his things to Barbara's house over the next few weeks. Claire's family would officially move in 3 months later, when Tyler's school year ended. In the following weeks, Howard made the transfer happen. He talked to lawyers, signed papers, made sure everything was legal and proper. He set up a modest maintenance fund to help with future repairs. He did everything he could to ensure the house was in perfect condition when the family fully took over. And every night, before sleeping, he went down to the basement and played the drum. He knew that soon it would no longer be part of his daily routine, but he also knew he would always be welcome. That the basement, the drum, and the house would always recognize him as someone who loved and was loved in return. The day of Howard's final move to Barbara's house was bittersweet. He packed his things, he didn't have much, and carried them down the dirt road. The distance was so short he didn't need a truck, just a few trips on foot, carrying boxes and bags. Tyler helped him, insisting on carrying the heavier items. They worked mostly in silence, a comfortable silence of people who don't need to fill every moment with words. When the last box was at Barbara's house, Howard returned once more to his old home. He walked slowly through the rooms, touching the walls he had painted, observing the windows he had repaired, feeling the energy of the place he had brought back to life. In the basement, he sat on the floor before the drum. He picked up the drumsticks for the last time as a resident of that house. And he played. He played with all the emotion he had. All the love, all the gratitude, all the sadness of leaving something behind, all the joy of knowing he was going to the right place. The echo came strong and clear, louder than ever before, as if the house was saying goodbye, but also thank you. As if it was sad about the departure but happy about the arrival, as if it understood that some chapters need to end so new ones can begin. When he finished, he climbed the stairs for the last time as a resident. Tyler was waiting at the top. "She's crying," the boy said softly. "The house. I can feel it. She's sad that you're leaving." "I'm sad too," Howard admitted. "But I'm also happy, because I know you'll take care of her. That you'll love her as she deserves. That you'll make her a true home, not just a renovation project. I'll try to be half the guardian you were. You'll be better, because you belong here in a way I never did. This is your story, Tyler. I just helped write some middle chapters." They went out together, closing the door carefully. Howard handed the keys to the boy, feeling the symbolic weight of that gesture. He was passing on more than just metal and property. He was passing on responsibility, trust, hope. Life at Barbara's house was surprisingly easy to adapt to. They established routines together, sharing tasks, respecting each other's spaces, but also creating shared spaces. Howard set up a small workshop in the backyard where he could continue his woodworking projects. Barbara turned the extra room into a sewing space she had always wanted, but never bothered with when living alone. They were company for each other, but also complete individuals. Not dependent, but interdependent. A partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection. And Howard visited the old house regularly. Whenever Tyler was there, they played the drum together. When the whole family gathered, he was automatically included. A constant and cherished presence. He continued helping with repairs when needed, but now as a neighbor and friend, not as owner and responsible party. Months later, on a warm summer night, there was a party at the house to celebrate Tyler's 16th birthday since his first visit. No, wait. He was 15 on the first visit. Now he was turning 16. Time had passed so quickly. The house was full of people, neighbors, friends from Tyler's new school, some families from the community. There was music, food, laughter. The house was alive in a way it hadn't been for decades. Every room breathed joy. Every wall echoed conversation. It was exactly how a house should be. At the height of the party, Tyler asked for silence. He was standing in the middle of the room, holding the old drum that had been his grandfather's. "I want to play something," he announced. "Something special. A song I composed thinking about this house, the people who loved it, and all of you here today." He sat on the floor, everyone forming a circle around him, and he began to play. The music was complex, layers of rhythm building upon one another. It had the call rhythm at the base, but over it was something new, something that spoke of loss and finding, of separation and reunion, of ending and new beginning. The house responded as always, but this time it wasn't just an echo. It was as if the house was playing along, adding its own voice to the composition. The walls vibrated in harmony. The floor pulsed with the rhythm. The ceiling echoed the beats. The entire house became a single instrument, played by the combination of the boy who loved it and the place that loved him back. Tears streamed down the faces of many present, even those who didn't know the full story, who didn't know about the drawings in the basement or the years of abandonment, felt something profound. They felt the power of a place that had waited patiently, that had carefully guarded memories, that had called back those who belonged to it. When the music ended, there was a moment of absolute silence. Then the whole house erupted in applause. People were standing, clapping, some crying, others laughing, all touched by something they couldn't fully express in words. Howard was at the back of the room, leaning against the wall, watching everything with a calm smile. Barbara was beside him, also smiling, also crying a little. "You did this," she whispered to him. "Made all this happen." "We did," he gently corrected. "You, me, the house, Tyler, everyone. It was a collective effort of love." "He's happy now, my grandson, I can see it. Genuinely happy. And you? Are you happy?" Barbara looked around the room full of people, at her grandson playing drums surrounded by friends, at her daughter and son-in-law chatting animatedly with neighbors, at the house that had been resurrected and now breathed life. "Yes," she replied with absolute certainty. "For the first time in many years, I am genuinely, completely happy." The party continued late into the night. When people finally started to leave, Howard and Barbara helped clean up. Tyler was exhausted but radiant, his face glowing with the kind of joy that only comes from doing something you deeply love and seeing people respond. "Thank you," he said to Howard as they dried dishes together. "For everything. For buying the house when no one else would, for bringing it back to life, for bringing my family back, for trusting me to care for it now, for everything. No need to thank me. I have as much to thank you for as you do me. You gave me purpose when I needed it most, gave me a family when I was alone, taught me it's never too late to start over." They finished cleaning in a comfortable silence. When everything was tidy, Howard and Barbara walked back to their house along the dark road, lit only by the full moon and the endless stars above. "Do you regret it?" Barbara suddenly asked, giving them the house. Howard didn't need to think long about the answer. "No, not one bit. That house needed them as much as they needed it. I was just the middleman, the facilitator, and I'm honored to have played that role. You're a good man, Howard Thompson. And you're a strong woman, Barbara Santos. We're quite a pair, the two of us." She laughed, the sound echoing in the quiet night. "We really are, aren't we?" The months continued to pass, bringing the normal changes that time always brings. Summer gave way to fall, which gave way to winter, which gave way to spring. The seasons turned as they always had, indifferent to human dramas, yet also beautifying them with their constant transformations. Tyler finished high school with good grades. He decided not to go to college immediately, opting for a gap year to figure out what he really wanted to do. He spent that time helping Howard with carpentry projects, learning practical skills that schools didn't teach. He also spent countless hours in the basement, composing music on the drum, developing a unique style that blended the traditional rhythms his grandfather had taught him with modern influences. Claire got a promotion at her job, bringing more financial stability to the family. Andrew started a small online consulting business that allowed him to work from home. They were building a life, not just surviving, but truly thriving. Barbara began teaching sewing classes for women in the community, something she had always wanted to do, but never had the courage when she was alone and sad. Now with Howard by her side giving support, she found the confidence to share her skills. Her house became a meeting point for the women in the neighborhood, a place of learning but also of conversation, of mutual support, of community. And Howard continued with his carpentry, but now making items that he donated to the community, a bench for the local square, a bookshelf for the small community library, wooden toys for underprivileged children. He had discovered that the true purpose wasn't in accumulating things or money, but in contributing, in making a difference, in using his skills to improve others' lives. One day, almost 2 years after buying the house at auction, Howard was working in his workshop when Tyler showed up. The boy was agitated, excited in a way Howard hadn't seen in a while. "I have an idea," Tyler announced without preamble. "A big idea. Tell me. I want to turn the basement into a music studio. Not just for me, but for others too. People like me who struggle with the outside world, who need a safe and quiet space to express themselves. I want to teach what my grandfather taught me, pass on the rhythm of the call, create a place where music can be therapy, connection, family." Howard stopped what he was doing and looked at the young man in front of him. He was no longer a boy. He was a young man with purpose, with vision, with heart. "It's a wonderful idea," he said sincerely. "What do you need to make it happen?" "Help. Financial, practical, moral. I need to turn the basement into something more structured. Better soundproofing, more space, some basic instruments. Nothing too expensive, but not cheap either." "I'll help you. Not financially, I don't have much, but I can help with the work. I can build whatever you need. And I can talk to people, look for donations, mobilize the community. I think a lot of people would want to support this." "Really, you would do that?" "Of course." "Do that?" "It's exactly the kind of project your grandfather would have loved. Using music to heal, to connect, to help. And it's exactly the kind of legacy this house deserves." They started the next day. Howard made drawings, calculated materials, created a realistic budget. Tyler put together a simple presentation explaining the vision, the purpose, the potential impact of the project. Together they went door to door in the community, sharing the idea, asking for support. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Neighbors donated materials. Some volunteered to help with the work. A local musician who had already retired donated some old but functional instruments. A music teacher from a nearby town offered to volunteer a few hours a week to help with lessons. The project took on a life of its own, growing beyond what Howard and Tyler had originally imagined. What started as a simple idea to transform a basement became a community movement. People who had never spoken before began working together. Families that were isolated found connection through the shared purpose. It took 3 months of intense work, but finally the studio was ready. The basement had been expanded, with better lighting, proper soundproofing, and space for up to 10 people to work comfortably. Tyler's childhood drawings were still there, now protected by special glass, a reminder of the past guiding the future. The grandfather's original drum occupied the place of honor, but now it was surrounded by other instruments. Drums of all kinds, some rattles, even a small donated keyboard. It wasn't sophisticated, but it was functional, welcoming, full of potential. The grand opening was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon. They invited the entire community, especially families with children or teenagers who could benefit from the space. There was food, live music, lots of conversation. But the most important moment came when Tyler took the first group of children downstairs to the new studio. There were 5 of them, aged 8 to 14, all facing some kind of challenge: autism, severe anxiety, ADHD, trauma. Children who struggled in the normal world but might flourish in a space like that. Howard watched from above, giving Tyler space to work. But he could hear, he could feel the magic happening. Tyler explained the call and response rhythm, told the story of his grandfather, showed them how to hold the drumsticks, how to let the rhythm flow naturally. And then the children began to play, awkwardly at first, but with growing confidence, and the house responded. That magical echo Howard had first heard almost 3 years ago now answered not just one boy, but several, all trying to find their voice through music. Tears came without Howard being able to control them. Not from sadness, but from profound joy, from fulfillment, from seeing the circle complete itself in a way he could never have imagined when he bought that old house at auction, driven only by a desperate need for purpose. Barbara appeared at his side, as she always did during important moments. She took his hand without saying a word. They just stood there, 2 old people who had found in their later years the kind of community, purpose and love that many search for their whole lives without ever finding. "He's going to make a difference," she said softly. "My grandson. He's going to touch lives, literally. He's going to give other children what that basement gave him, a safe place, a form of expression, a family. And he's going to do all this while living in the house that was saved from abandonment, in the house that waited 20 years for him to return, in the house that called us all back when we were lost. Do you believe now?" Barbara asked, looking at him. "That the house has memory, that places can love?" Howard thought about it. The practical, logical man he had always been would have said no, that they were just coincidences, rational explanations for everything. But the man he had become over the last 3 years, the man who had heard the drum echo so many times, the man who had seen a family reconnect through love and music, Yes, he answered honestly. Yes, I believe. I don't know how or why. I don't know if it's something supernatural or just something science doesn't understand yet. But I believe this house is special, that it has a heart, and that we've all been blessed to be part of its story. The following months brought more growth. The basement studio became popular, not just in the local community but throughout the region. Families traveled from neighboring towns to bring their children. Tyler trained volunteer assistants to handle the growing demand. The project grew beyond a hobby, becoming almost a full-time job, but a job he deeply loved. Claire and Andrew watched with pride as their son flourished. He had found his calling in a way many young people never do. He didn't need to go to university or follow a traditional path. He created his own path, based on his own experiences and passions. Howard continued to help when needed, but mainly gave Tyler space to lead. He knew when it was time to support from a distance instead of always being present. This wisdom, gained through decades of life, of mistakes and successes, of learning to balance helping with smothering. On a particularly beautiful afternoon, almost 3 years after the initial purchase of the house, Howard was sitting alone on the porch, not the one from the old house, but Barbara's, which was now his home too. He watched the sunset, thinking about how life had changed, how he had changed. Margaret had been his love, his companion for nearly 5 decades. Nothing could change or diminish that. But he had learned that the human heart has infinite capacity, that loving the memory of those who are gone doesn't prevent loving those who are present, that starting over doesn't mean forgetting what came before. Barbara came out of the house, bringing 2 glasses of fresh lemonade. She sat beside him without saying a word, just sharing the moment. They had developed a communication that went beyond words. They knew when the other needed conversation and when they needed silence. They knew when to offer advice and when just to listen. They knew how to be present without being intrusive. "What are you thinking about?" she finally asked. "About how everything has changed, how I've changed. 3 years ago, I was a lost, empty man, just counting the days. Today I have purpose. I have family. I have reasons to wake up with a smile." The house did that. The house started it, but it was the people, you, Tyler, Claire, Andrew, the whole community. The house was the catalyst, but the love of the people was what really changed everything. Love has that power, Barbara agreed. To transform, to heal, to bring back what was dead. We learned it the hard way, but we learned. They fell silent again, drinking their lemonade, watching the sky change colors. Across the street, they could hear the muffled sound of a drum coming from the old house's basement. Tyler was having another session with a group of children. The rhythm was irregular, multiple beats overlapping, but there was something beautiful in the cacophony. It was the sound of children learning, experimenting, expressing themselves. It was the sound of life. Howard closed his eyes and let the sound wash over him. And he could swear, though he'd never say it aloud for fear of sounding crazy, that he heard 2 rhythms. The rhythm of the children playing, awkward but full of enthusiasm. And the rhythm of the house responding, constant and loving, guiding, supporting, embracing. Thump, 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 thump. The rhythm of calling, calling the lost home, calling the wounded to healing, calling the lonely to community, calling all of them to something greater than themselves. A few more months passed. The routine was firmly established. The studio operated 3 times a week, always full, always noisy with the sound of happy children making music. Tyler had developed a complete curriculum, teaching not just rhythm but also the history behind the music, the importance of emotional expression, techniques for calm and focus. Some of the children who started in the program had progressed impressively. Parents reported fewer anxiety episodes, better behavior in school, more openness to expressing emotions in healthy ways. The studio was making a real, measurable difference in people's lives. The community noticed. The local newspaper did a story about the project. A radio station from the neighboring town interviewed Tyler. There was even a funding proposal from an organization that supported music therapy programs. Nothing huge, but enough to buy better instruments, maybe expand a bit more, pay a small stipend to the volunteers. Tyler was being careful about growth. He didn't want to lose the essence of what he had created in the rush to expand. He frequently consulted Howard, Barbara, his parents, wanting multiple perspectives before making important decisions. That humility, that willingness to listen and learn, was perhaps his most admirable quality. It was during one of these consultations, on an evening when everyone was gathered at Barbara's house for dinner, that Claire shared something important. "I'm pregnant," she announced, her voice trembling with emotion. "After so many years thinking Tyler would be our only child, we're having another baby." The silence that followed was one of positive shock. Then the entire table erupted in joy. Hugs, tears, congratulations, plans already being made. Barbara cried uncontrollably, clinging to her daughter, barely able to believe she would be a grandmother again. Tyler was beaming. The idea of being an older brother, after years of being an only child, seemed to enchant him. He was already talking about teaching the baby to play drums as soon as they had enough coordination, about all the things they would do together. Howard observed everything from a comfortable, emotional distance, happy for them but also aware that this was a family moment. He began to discreetly rise to give them privacy, but Barbara held him back. "Where do you think you're going?" she asked. "Your family too. This is a celebration for all of us." "Family," Claire agreed, reaching her hand out to him from across the table. "You're the honorary uncle to all my children, present and future." Howard felt something warm and heavy settle in his chest. Family. He had a family again. Not the one he was born into, not the one he built with Margaret, but a new one, built through unusual circumstances and genuine love. A chosen family. And that made it even more special. The baby was born 6 months later, a small and perfect girl who cried a lot but also smiled frequently. They named her Madeline, not specifically because of Margaret, but the name was chosen after Howard told stories about his late wife, and everyone agreed they wanted to honor in some way the woman he had loved so much. Howard held Madeline for the first time with trembling hands, marveling at how small and fragile she was. How many years had passed since he last held a baby? Decades. He and Margaret never had children, not by choice but due to medical circumstances. It had been a sadness they carried quietly throughout their life together. But now, holding this little child who wasn't his by blood, but was his by love, Howard felt something heal inside him. An old wound he didn't even know was still open, the wound of never having been a father, of never having experienced that particular kind of love. "She already loves you," Barbara whispered beside him. "Look how calm she is in your arms. Babies know. They know who is safe, who is loving, who will protect." Madeline opened her eyes, blue and bright, and looked directly at Howard. He could swear she truly saw him, not just as a shape or shadow, but as a person, and in that gaze there was trust, acceptance, love. "Hi, little Madeline," he murmured. "Welcome to the family, welcome home, welcome to all the wonderful mess we've created here." The first months with Madeline in the family were an adjustment. Claire was exhausted from caring for a newborn while working. Andrew did what he could, but he was also busy. Tyler helped when possible, but he was committed to the studio that couldn't just stop operating. It was Barbara and Howard who filled the gap. They became the de facto babysitters, caring for Madeline during the day when the parents needed to work or rest. Howard discovered he had a way with babies. His touch was firm, but gentle. His voice, naturally low and calm, soothed her when she cried. His arms, strong from decades of manual work, could hold her for hours without tiring. Barbara cooked for the entire family, making sure Claire had nutritious meals without having to worry about preparation. She washed clothes, organized the house, handled all the little tasks that pile up when there's a baby demanding constant attention, and slowly, gradually, the family dynamic solidified in this new configuration. It wasn't traditional. Grandmother and her elderly friend caring for the baby while parents worked, teenage brother running a music therapy program in the basement. But it worked. It worked because everyone was committed, because everyone genuinely loved each other, because everyone understood that family isn't about conformity, but about mutual support. Madeline grew up surrounded by love and music. Even as a baby, She was already exposed to the sound of the drum coming from the basement. Howard would carry her down there sometimes, letting her hear the rhythm, feel the vibration. She always grew quiet when the music played, her big eyes absorbing everything. "She's going to be musical," Tyler declared confidently. "I can see it. It's in her blood. Grandfather, me, now her, the next generation keeping the tradition." And Howard believed him. He believed that Madeline would grow up loving that house, that basement, that drum, that she would hear stories about the great-grandfather who created the calling rhythm, about the brother who turned a simple space into a place of healing, about the elderly neighbor who saved the house from abandonment, and these stories would become part of who she was. More months passed. Madeline had her first birthday, a big celebration in the old house's garden with all the children from the music program present, plus neighbors, friends, extended family. There were cakes, balloons, laughter, and at the end, when most guests had left, Tyler took Madeline to the basement. She was standing already, holding onto furniture for balance, taking a few hesitant steps alone. Tyler sat her on the floor in front of the drum, placing the miniature drumsticks that Howard had made especially for her in her little hands. "Play, Mari," he encouraged. "Just hit it, see what happens." The girl looked at the drumsticks, then at the drum, processing with the intense seriousness that babies sometimes have. Then, with a clumsy but determined movement, she hit the drum. Thump! The sound echoed in the basement. Madeline giggled, delighted. She hit it again, harder this time. Thump! And then, as had happened so many times before with other people, the echo came, the house responding, recognizing, accepting another member into the family. Thump! Madeline stopped, looking around confused, but not scared, searching for the sound's source. Tyler was crying silently, as was Claire, who was filming everything from the stairs. Howard and Barbara hugged, sharing another miraculous moment in that house full of small miracles. "The house recognized her," Barbara whispered. "Like it recognized all of us. She's part of the story now, forever." The years kept passing, as years do. Howard grew older, his beard getting whiter, his back bending a little more each season. But his spirit remained strong, fueled by the love surrounding him, by the purpose he had found, by the family he had built. Madeline grew quickly, as all children do. By 3, she was already playing simple rhythms on the drum, her concentration fierce when holding the drumsticks. By 5, she was already helping Tyler with the younger children who came to the studio, showing them how to hold the instruments, encouraging them with smiles and kind words. The music therapy program had expanded considerably. It now operated 5 days a week, with a waiting list of families wanting to participate. Tyler had hired 2 paid assistants and coordinated a team of 10 volunteers. What started as a simple idea had become a respected institution in the region, referenced by schools, doctors, and therapists. But growth brought challenges. The basement, even expanded, was becoming too small. There were talks about needing more space, maybe building an extension, perhaps even looking for a separate location. But everyone hesitated to make that change. The basement was special. It was where it all began. It was where the magic happened. It was Howard who suggested the solution. At a family meeting where everyone was discussing the problem, he cleared his throat and said, "What if we built something new on the property? Not an extension of the house, but a separate building, dedicated just to music. We'd leave the basement as it is, as a sort of origin room where Tyler gives the first lessons to beginners, and we'd use the new space for larger groups, for performances, for the more professional side of the program." Everyone considered the idea. It had merit. The property was big enough, and keeping the basement untouched would preserve the essence, the memory, the special connection to the past. But the cost, Andrew began, ever the pragmatic one. Building from scratch would be expensive, much more than we can afford. "What if we did a crowdfunding campaign?" Tyler suggested, excited by the idea. "The program has many supporters. The kids' parents, people from the community, even folks from outside who've heard about the work. I bet many would contribute." The idea quickly gained traction. They created an online page explaining the need, showing the program's impact, detailing how the funds would be used. Howard, who had never been much for technology, watched in admiration as Tyler and some of the program's older teenagers put together videos, posts, and promotional strategies. The response exceeded all expectations. In 2 weeks, they had half the amount needed. In 1 month, the full goal. In 2 months, they had exceeded the original target by 40%, allowing not only for the construction, but also for the creation of a maintenance fund and the purchase of professional quality instruments. Construction began in the spring. Howard, even at 76, insisted on helping. Not with the heavy work, his days of carrying beams and digging foundations were over, but with consulting, supervision, small finishing touches that required precision more than strength. His hands were still skillful, his eye for detail still sharp. Tyler worked alongside him whenever possible, learning not just carpentry but also patience, attention to detail, and pride in a job well done. They were quiet conversations, communicated more through actions than words. A grandson teaching his honorary uncle about music and technology. An honorary uncle teaching his grandson about construction and persistence. A generational exchange of knowledge and love. The building took shape slowly. It was simple but beautiful, made mainly from reclaimed wood that Howard had insisted on using. Every board had a story, coming from old barns, demolished houses, renovated bridges. It was eco-friendly, economical, and symbolically perfect. A new place built with pieces of the past. Madeline, now 6 years old, visited the construction site daily. She wore a tiny hard hat that Andrew had bought for her, and took her role as quality inspector very seriously. She asked endless questions about why things were done a certain way, how the tools worked when it would be ready. Her curiosity was endless and charming. Grandpa Howard, she called him that, even though there was no blood relation. When it's finished, will I be able to play there too? Of course, Princess. This place is for you as much as for anyone else. Maybe even more since you grew up with this house, with this music. You are part of this place's soul. What is a soul? Howard stopped working, considering how to explain such an abstract concept to a 6-year-old. A soul it's what makes something special. What makes you love something or someone beyond what makes logical sense. This house has a soul. Your brother's drum has a soul. And you also have a beautiful and bright soul. Madeline processed this with the seriousness that young children bring to profound matters. And do you have a soul too, Grandpa? Yes, I do. We all do. Your soul is good. I can feel it. Howard felt his eyes burn. Of all the beautiful things that had happened in recent years, the simple moments with Madeline were among the most precious. She made him feel young again, useful, necessary. She called him Grandpa without hesitation, accepting him completely as family without any of the complications adults bring to relationships. The construction was completed at the end of summer, 9 months after it began. It was a small but perfectly functional building, with a large room for group classes, 2 smaller rooms for individual instruction, a small stage for performances, and even a tiny office for Tyler to manage the administrative side of the program. The grand opening was scheduled for a Saturday, inviting everyone who had contributed in some way. Hundreds of people showed up. The garden of the old house was fuller than it had ever been. Children running between adults, music playing, food in abundance. When it was time for the official speech, everyone gathered in front of the new building. Tyler was nervous, shuffling papers with notes he had prepared, but when he started speaking, his voice came out firm and clear. Almost 6 years ago, I returned to this house for the first time in a decade. I was 15 years old and scared. I didn't know if this place would still recognize me. I didn't know if I still belonged here. But the moment I went down those stairs and played my grandfather's drum, I knew I was home. The house recognized me, it accepted me back, and it began a journey that brought me here, to this moment. He paused, emotion briefly taking over. Claire, standing beside him, squeezed his arm in silent support. This building represents so many things. It represents growth, yes. It represents an opportunity to help more children. But most importantly, it represents community. Every board here was donated or bought with donated money. Every nail was hammered by volunteer hands. This place exists because you all believe that music can heal, that different children deserve special spaces, that together we can make a difference. He looked at Howard, who was at the back of the crowd, trying not to draw attention. But above all, this place exists because of one man, a man who bought an old house that no one else wanted, who heard the sound of a drum and instead of running away, investigated, who found children's drawings on a wall and chose to preserve them, who brought my family back when it was broken. Mr. Howard Thompson, can you come up here, please? Howard wanted to refuse, wanted to stay in the shadows, but the crowd parted, creating a path, and he had no choice but to walk to the front. Barbara was crying beside him, gently pushing him forward. When he reached Tyler's side, the young man hugged him tightly. Without you, none of this would exist. You saved more than a house, you saved a family, you saved me. And through me, you are saving all these children who come here looking for what I was looking for. A safe place, a voice, a family. The crowd erupted in applause. Howard, always uncomfortable with attention, just nodded, tears flowing freely now. But this time they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pure joy, of fulfillment, of seeing the fruit of years of work and love manifesting in something so beautiful. There's one more thing, Tyler continued when the applause died down. This building needs a name. We thought a lot about it. We considered several options, but in the end, there was only one choice that made sense. He turned to a plaque covered with a cloth on the wall of the new building. With a dramatic pull, he revealed the inscription, Margaret's Space Where Music Meets Heart. Howard froze. His wife. They had named the place after his wife. For a moment he couldn't breathe. The emotion was too overwhelming. You told so many stories about her, Tyler explained gently. About how she believed in helping people. About how she had an enormous heart. About how she always saw the best in everyone. We thought it would be appropriate, that she would be happy knowing her name is associated with a place that does so much good. Howard couldn't speak. He just shook his head, accepting, grateful, beyond words. He felt Barbara beside him, holding his hand firmly. He felt Madeline hugging his leg. He felt the love of that entire community wrapping around him like a warm blanket. Margaret would be proud. He knew it deep in his soul. She always wanted him to live fully, to make a difference, to not close himself off in pain after her departure. And look what he had done. Look what they all had done together. The party continued late into the night. There were tours of Margaret's space, with Tyler showing every detail, explaining how each room would be used. There was music, of course, groups of children playing what they had learned, showing progress, celebrating achievements. There was delicious food prepared by dozens of volunteers. There was laughter, hugs, more happy tears. When it finally grew dark and people began to leave, Howard found himself alone for a moment in Margaret's space. He walked slowly through the empty rooms, touching the walls, feeling the energy of the place. He could already imagine the children who would come, the lives that would be touched, the small miracles that would happen there. "Maggie," he whispered into the air, "I hope you're seeing this. I hope you know I never forgot you, that I never stopped loving you. But I also found a way to continue, to truly live, not just exist. I think you would like them, all of them. Barbara and her quiet strength. Tyler and his enormous heart. Madeline and her endless joy. They're my family now, not replacing you, but adding, expanding the heart you filled for so many years." He heard footsteps behind him and turned. It was Tyler, carrying Madeline, who had fallen asleep in his arms. "I came to get you," he said quietly so as not to wake the girl. "We're having dinner together, all of us. At the old house, of course. There's Grandma Barbara's soup and fresh bread and lots of good conversation. I'll be right there. I just needed a moment. Talking to her. To Mrs. Margaret." Howard smiled, surprised that Tyler understood so easily. "Yes, it seems silly, I know. It's not silly. It's love. Love doesn't end just because someone leaves. It continues, transformed but not diminished. You're too wise for your age. I had good teachers." They walked back to the house together, Madeline snoring softly on her brother's shoulder. The garden was being cleaned up by volunteers, everyone working together to get everything organized. Inside the house, Barbara had set the table. Claire was heating the soup. Andrew was arranging chairs for everyone to sit. It was such a normal, everyday scene, but also so precious. A family sharing a meal after an important day. A family that wasn't connected by blood, but by choice, by love, by shared experience. During dinner, they talked about the future, about plans for Margaret's space, about how to allocate the rooms, about schedules and timetables, but also about small things. About how Madeline had lost a tooth and put it under her pillow for the tooth fairy. About how Barbara had finally learned to use the internet for video calls. About how Howard had started writing his memoirs, wanting to document the journey of the past few years. "You should publish when you finish," Claire suggested. "Not necessarily as a book, but at least share it online. People need stories of hope, of second beginnings, of finding family in unexpected places." "Maybe," Howard agreed, though the idea made him uncomfortable. He wasn't a writer. He was just an old man who had lived and learned. But Tyler insisted, "No, really, your story is inspiring. A man who loses everything and finds something even better. A home that calls back those who belong to it. A community built around music and love. It's powerful. It's real. People need to know miracles like this can happen." Madeline, now awake and chewing on bread, added with the absolute certainty of a child, "And there have to be pictures of you and the drum and the house, so people can see it's true." Everyone laughed, agreeing that if Howard ever published anything, Madeline would be the image consultant. The years continued their relentless flow. Madeline started school, excelling in music as everyone predicted, but also surprising everyone with talent in math and science. Tyler took on increasing responsibility at Margaret's Space, transitioning from facilitator to true director. The program expanded even further, forming partnerships with schools, clinics, other organizations. Barbara, now in her 70s, began slowing down a bit. She couldn't look after Madeline for entire days like she used to. Her body was tired, her joints ached. But her spirit remained strong and she found new ways to contribute. She taught sewing to mothers of children in the program, cooked in large batches, freezing meals, so the whole family always had home-cooked food available. She was grandmother and matriarch, wise and loving. Howard also felt the weight of the years. He was 78 now, his movements slower, his memory sometimes failing on small details. But he still woke with purpose every day, still visited the old house regularly, still offered advice when asked, and silence when appropriate. It was during one of these visits, on a quiet afternoon when he was alone in the house, that he decided to go down to the basement one last time as he had done years ago. The stairs were harder now, each step a small achievement, but he made it down safely. The basement was exactly as he had left it years before, clean, well lit, welcoming. Tyler's childhood drawings still on the wall, preserved, the drum on the pedestal, waiting, some smaller instruments on the shelves. It was a sacred space, a memorial of love. Howard sat on the step as he had done hundreds of times. He picked up the drumsticks, feeling the familiar weight, the known texture. And he played. Thump, 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 thump. The calling rhythm, the rhythm he had first heard 5 years ago, the rhythm that changed everything. And as always, the house responded. But this time it was different. The echo didn't come just as a reflection of sound. It came with weight, with presence, with something Howard could only describe as deep peace. He understood, in that moment of absolute clarity, what the echo had always been. It wasn't supernatural. It wasn't the house literally being conscious. It was something simpler and more profound. It was the physical reverberation of accumulated love. It was the energy of all the people who had loved that space, manifesting in vibration, in sound, in presence. Every child who had found their voice there contributed. Every family that had been reunited added. Every moment of joy, of healing, of connection, accumulated in the walls, in the floor, in the very structure of the place. And when someone played with love, with intention, the house simply returned what it had received. It wasn't magic. It was emotional physics. It was tangible proof that places matter, that memories have weight, that love leaves a real and measurable mark on the world. Howard laughed, the sound echoing in the small space. It had taken 5 years to fully understand, but now he understood, and the understanding brought even greater peace. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step a small victory. When he got upstairs, he found a surprise waiting. Madeline had come from school, heading straight to the house as she often did. She was in the living room, backpack still on her shoulders, looking around with a determined expression. "Grandpa Howard," she shouted when she saw him. "I need help. I have a school project. I need to tell my family's story, and you're my family, so I need your story too." Howard sat down with her on the porch, the afternoon sun bathing everything in golden light. And he told her. He told her about Margaret, about loss, about loneliness, about buying the house at an auction, about hearing the drum, about meeting Barbara, about bringing back Tyler's family, about building Margaret's space, about finding purpose and love when he thought life was over. Madeline listened with fierce attention, asking smart questions, wanting to understand every detail. When Howard finished, she stayed quiet for a long moment. "So you're like a hero," she concluded finally, "who saved the house and saved the people." "No, Princess, I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who was lost and got found. People saved me as much as I saved anything. But heroes need to be saved sometimes too. That's how the best stories work. Everyone saving each other a little bit." Howard smiled, amazed at the wisdom of an 8-year-old. "You're right. That's exactly how the best stories work. And our story isn't over yet, right? There are still more chapters." There are many more chapters. But Howard was wrong, at least about his part in the story. 2 weeks later, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, Howard didn't wake up. Barbara went to check when he didn't show up for breakfast, finding him still in bed, an expression of absolute peace on his face. The doctors said later it was his heart. Quick, painless, exactly as he would have wanted. The news shocked the whole community. Howard had been a constant presence, a pillar, someone who seemed like he would always be there. His funeral was huge, hundreds of people he had touched directly or indirectly. Children from the music program played, a beautiful and tearful tribute. Barbara spoke, her voice steady despite the tears. Claire and Andrew shared memories. Tyler read a poem he had written. But it was Madeline, just 8 years old, who captured the essence of the man Howard Thompson had been. She climbed the pulpit with help, so small she could barely reach the microphone, and spoke with a clear voice. "Grandpa Howard once told me that soul is what makes something special, what makes you love beyond what makes sense. He had the biggest soul of all, and that soul is still here. In the house he saved, in Margaret's space that carries the name of the woman he loved, in every child who finds a voice through music, in me who he made feel loved even though we weren't blood relatives. Grandpa Howard isn't gone. He just changed form. Now he's part of everything we built. Forever." They buried Howard in the local cemetery, near a large tree he had commented was beautiful. The headstone was simple, with his name, dates, and a line, "He made a difference." Barbara was devastated. 50 years may seem different from a marriage, but love is love no matter the form. She had loved Howard, not romantically but deeply, and his absence left a huge hole, but she had family around to support her. Claire moved in temporarily to take care of her. Tyler visited daily. Madeline practically lived with her grandmother in the first few weeks, her cheerful presence the only thing that brought smiles to Barbara's face. It was Madeline who suggested a month later that they visit the old house together. Barbara had avoided going there, knowing she would see Howard in every corner, that she would feel his absence too sharply. But Madeline insisted, holding her hand, gently guiding her. They walked along the dirt road that Howard had traveled thousands of times. They entered through the front door he had repaired with such care. They passed through the rooms he had transformed from ruins into a home, and then they descended to the basement. The drum was there, waiting as always. Barbara touched it lightly, memories flooding in. All the times she had watched Howard play, all the conversations they had had in that space, all the magic she had witnessed. "Play it, Grandma," Madeline encouraged. "Play the calling rhythm." "I don't know how, sweetheart. I never learned. Grandpa Howard showed me. I can teach you. It's easy." And so, in that basement that had witnessed so many first times, Barbara learned the rhythm. Madeline guided her hands, showing where to strike, when to pause, how to maintain the pattern. Thump, 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 thump. and the house responded. The echo came clear and strong, as it always had, as it always would for anyone who played with love, with intention, with an open heart. Barbara cried, but these weren't just tears of sadness. They were tears of connection, of feeling that Howard was still there in some way, of understanding that death ends a life, but not a relationship, not love, not impact. In the months that followed, Barbara began to heal, never completely, some wounds never fully close, but enough to start living again, to smile, to find joy in the days. She continued living in the house she had shared with Howard, but now surrounded by memories that brought more comfort than pain. Margaret's space continued to grow, honoring both the woman who inspired the name and the man who had made it all possible. Tyler established a scholarship in Howard's name, helping families who couldn't afford to participate in the program. The community's response was overwhelming, donations ensuring that no child was ever turned away due to lack of funds. Madeline continued playing, developing her own compositions, her own style. But she always began and ended her sessions with the calling rhythm. It was her way of honoring the grandfather who wasn't a grandfather by blood, but was a grandfather where it mattered, in the heart. Years later, when Madeline was 15, she gave her first solo performance at Margaret's Space. The room was packed, people standing because there weren't enough seats. Barbara was in the front row, her hair completely white now, but her eyes still sharp and attentive. Madeline stepped onto the stage, carrying the original drum, the drum that had belonged to her great-grandfather. That had been Tyler's as a child. That had been played by Howard so many times. That was now hers, passed through generations, carrying history and love. Before playing, she spoke, "This drum has a story that begins with my great-grandfather, a musician who taught his grandson a special rhythm, a calling rhythm, to call back those we love when they are far away. That story passes through my brother, who rediscovered the drum and through it rediscovered family, home, purpose. And it passes through a man named Howard Thompson, who heard this drum playing in an empty house and instead of running away came closer, who chose love over fear, connection over isolation, hope over despair." She paused, looking directly at Barbara. "Grandpa Howard taught me that family isn't just blood. It's choice, it's who shows up, it's who stays. It's who loves you not in spite of who you are, but because of who you are. He was my family as much as anyone in this room. And through the music he helped preserve, he still is, he always will be." Then she played. Then she began with the calling rhythm, simple and pure. Then she built upon it, adding layers, complexity, emotion. It was technically perfect, but also deeply felt. It was music that came from the soul, and the house responded. Not just Margaret's Space where she was playing, but also the old house a few yards away. People swore afterward they could hear an echo coming from there too, the two structures harmonizing, creating something greater than the sum of their parts. When the music ended, there was absolute silence for long seconds. Then the room exploded. Applause, shouts, tears. Madeline had inherited not only the talent, but also the ability to touch hearts, to create connection through sound. Barbara was the first to hug her when she came off the stage, holding the girl who wasn't so much a girl anymore with desperate strength. "He would have loved this," she whispered. "Howard. He would have loved seeing you play like that, seeing everything you've become." "I think he saw," Madeline replied. "I think he's always watching, because he put his soul into this place, and soul doesn't die. It just transforms. Life went on, as life always does." Madeline finished high school, went to college to study music therapy formally. Tyler married a beautiful woman who had volunteered in the program, and they had 2 children who grew up running through the same spaces where everything had begun. Barbara lived to 86, surrounded by family until the end. When she finally passed, it was peacefully in her sleep, smiling. They buried her beside Howard, under the same big tree, their headstones side by side as their lives had been. Friends to the end and beyond. The old house remained in the family, passing to Madeline when she graduated from college and returned to take over the direction of Margaret's Space along with Tyler. She lived there, in that house that had held so many stories, and added her own. She got married in the garden, had children who played in the basement, continued the tradition of love and music. And always, always the drum remained in the basement. It wasn't played by just anyone now. It had become almost a relic. But on special occasions, at important moments, Madeline would take it from its pedestal and play. And the echo always came. The house always answered. Love always resonated. 20 years after Howard's death, Madeline organized a special celebration. It was the 20th anniversary of Margaret's space, but also a tribute to all who had made it possible. They set up a photo exhibition on the walls, documenting the journey. Young Howard, old Howard, always with that characteristic leather hat. Barbara smiling, cooking, hugging grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Tyler as a child, and Tyler as an adult. The house in ruins, and the house restored. The family separated, and the family reunited. Hundreds of people came, adults who had been children in the program, grateful parents, community members, even some reporters from bigger newspapers interested in the unique story of that place. At the climax of the celebration, Madeline took a select group to the basement of the old house. Her husband, her children, Tyler and his family, and about 20 former students from the original program, all adults now. "This is where it began," she said, pointing to Tyler's drawing still preserved on the wall. A 6-year-old boy, scared and confused, making art, leaving his mark, saying, "I exist, I matter, I love this place." She picked up the drum, the same worn drumsticks that had been used by 4 generations now. "And here," she said, showing the simple instrument, "is the heart of it all." A handmade drum by a man who wanted to teach his grandson not to feel alone. A rhythm that became a call. A sound that became an echo. An object that became a symbol of everything we can be when we choose love over fear. Then she played, and everyone who knew the rhythm, who had learned it over the years, played along, some with instruments they had brought, others just clapping, others still just swaying to the beat. The sound grew, filling the basement, rising to the house, expanding to the nearby Margaret's space, spreading through the garden where hundreds were still celebrating. It was cacophony, but it was also harmony. It was many voices, but also one. It was music, but it was also prayer, celebration, gratitude. And the house responded, stronger than ever before, as if 2 decades of additional love, of lives touched, of small miracles, had amplified its ability to echo. The walls vibrated, the floor pulsed. Every person there felt it in their body, not just heard it with their ears. It was a transcendent, inexplicable, perfect moment. When they finally fell silent, nobody moved for a long time. They just stood there, absorbing, feeling, being. Then someone started to cry, tears of pure joy, and soon everyone was crying, laughing, hugging, united by music, memory, and something greater than anyone could name. Madeline came up from the basement last, turning around once more before leaving. She looked at the drawings, at the drum now back on its pedestal, at the space that had held so much love for so many years. "Thank you, Grandpa Howard," she whispered, "for buying this house when nobody else wanted it, for hearing the drum, for not being afraid, for bringing my family back, for teaching me that love is a choice, not an accident. Thank you for everything." And she could swear, though she'd never say it out loud, that she heard a reply. Not in words, but in feeling. Approval. Pride. A continuous love that death hadn't diminished one bit. She climbed the stairs, turned off the light, closed the door. But she didn't lock it. She never locked it. This house was for anyone who needed it. It always would be. That was Howard Thompson's true legacy, not the physical repairs that would eventually need redoing, but the idea that places matter, that we can choose to be family, that it's never too late to start over, that the sound of a drum in an empty house can change everything, if we're willing to listen. The celebrations continued late into the night. When everyone had finally left and Madeline was alone in the house with her sleeping family, she sat on the porch, the same porch where Howard had sat so many times, watching the sunset, reflecting on life and loss and love. The moon was full, illuminating everything with silver light. She could see Margaret's space across the garden, dark now but full of potential for tomorrow. She could see the dirt road where Barbara used to walk over for visits. She could see in her imagination a young Howard driving his pickup truck for the first time, nervous and hopeful, with no idea how that decision would change so many lives. A gentle breeze blew, moving the tree leaves, bringing with it the scent of jasmine from the garden. Madeline closed her eyes and just felt. She felt profound gratitude for being born into this family, in this place, in this story. She felt the responsibility to keep the legacy alive, to pass on what she had received. She felt hope for the future, knowing the story was far from over. Her children would learn the call rhythm. They would teach their own children. Generation after generation, keeping alive the tradition started by a man she'd never met, but whose impact had shaped her entire existence. Generation after generation, playing that simple drum, hearing the echo respond, being reminded that they are not alone. They never were. They never will be. Because as long as there is love, as long as there is memory, as long as there are people willing to choose connection over isolation, the story continues. The music continues. The echo continues. Thump, thump, thump. Thump, thump, thump. Forever. End of story. Now, dear listener, tell us what you thought of the story of Howard, Barbara, Tyler, and Madeline. Do you believe places can hold memories, that it's never too late to start over? Leave your opinion in the comments with sincere words. We'll see you in the next story. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one.